All right, we're talking about radical expressions, and well, I don't know. It depends on how you did with factoring. If you struggled with factoring, this is a difficult section, but if you got it, although things are going to get complicated here over the next few sections, if you got the factoring down, you'll be just fine. So, a radical expression, we've been looking at what would be called polynomials. So something like this. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to turn them into fractions. We're going to have one on the top and one on the bottom. And so where this is all going is that what we're going to do is we're going to use our factoring skills to slash out, for lack of a better term, anything that is a match. So we're going to reduce fractions. Just like if I had 2 over 4, that's the same as 2 over 2 times 2. And I can slash down, remove those matching 2's, right? And I'd be left with 1/2. Well, we're going to be doing the same thing. Now, as we do that, all this lesson is, for this video, is we're going to talk about something called the restricted value. And what that means is, if I had something like this, the x is any number because it's an I don't know. So I could put 1 in there for x, 2, 3, 4, I could go on forever. But there's one number that I am not allowed to use. Do you see that if I put in a 0 for x, that would be 1 divided by 0, which isn't allowed. I can't, this is division, so I can't take one number and then divide it among 0 people. It would mean I would be making the number disappear. So this breaks the laws of mathematics. You are not allowed to divide by a 0. So if we do that, it's called undefined. Now, let's look at our choices over here. And all we're trying to do is find values that are not permitted. They're called undefined. And all we got to do is set the bottom equal to 0. And that's it. So what would make this undefined, the restricted value, is that x can't be 0. Because if it was, it would make this whole thing 0. Now let's do the same thing for the second one. I'm just going to now solve this. I'm just taking the denominator, the bottom. It doesn't matter what the top is. It has nothing to do with it. It's only the bottom. So I'm going to solve this. Just basic algebra skills. Okay, so b equal to negative 5 over 2 would break this. It would make this undefined, and that's not permitted. Now, here's where our factoring skills come in on this last one. Remember, it's only the bottom that can break this. So if I factor it, here's what I can see. We saw the zero product property, which means if either one of these becomes 0, the whole thing does. So we're going to work it twice. So if x turned out to be negative 3, or if x turned out to be negative 2, then the bottom of that fraction would become a 0, which isn't permitted. It would be undefined. So we call that restricted values. Okay, we're just going to do the same thing here. Pause it if you want to try it on your own, but I'm going to keep going. This is literally the same thing that I just did. We're going to set the bottom equal to 0. So x cannot be 0. That's our restricted value. Here on b, just setting the denominator. Again, the numerator, the top, doesn't matter. It can't break it. Okay, now when we get to this last one, we have to factor. So go back. I'm going to just do it. I hope you've got this down. But this would be what I'm looking for. And I'm setting that equal to 0. So the zero product property says either one of these could be 0. So I'm going to just do them. Okay. If a turned out to be negative 3, it would make this side 0. If a turns out to be negative 1, it would make this side 0. So these are my restricted values. All right, we're just doing it again here. As always, you can pause it. Now, this looks slightly different, but it really isn't. If I'm solving for the I don't know there, I'm just going to divide it on both sides. And 0 divided, so divide both sides by 5. That's still 0. So my restricted value is still 0 there. Now, again, I'm just doing the denominator. That's the only thing that could break that fraction. So solve that. So negative 2/3. If you put that in for y right here, it's going to make that denominator 0. And then again, we've got one we have to factor. Again, just the denominator. It's the only thing that matters. Okay, make sure I did that right. Now, I'm going to jump to the chase. Do you see that these are the two numbers? I'm just setting them each equal to 0 and solving. And I come up with those for the restricted values for C. Okay, now the rest of this section is pretty easy. All we're going to be doing here before our next section, we're going to really start factoring and breaking stuff down. Here all we're going to do is, do you know how to put in the values? So if I have x, they're just giving us options here. They're telling me that x is 0. Let's put it in and see what we get. So they're just subbing in a 0 for wherever there's an x and doing the math. Well, obviously anything times 0 drops out, and you see that's what you'd have left. Okay, now they're telling us let's try it with 2, putting 2 in. Just be careful of order of operations. You multiply first. That's 4 plus 3, 7 on the top, 6 minus 5 on the bottom. Now, if you're going to have any trouble with this section, it might be the signs, so be careful here. So I'm putting in a negative 3, so it's inside parentheses there. So I'm multiplying it. I get negative 6 plus 3, down at the bottom, negative 9 minus 5. So you can follow the logic. Only thing to watch out for there is I've got a minus on the top and the minus on the bottom. They would cancel. Okay, so we're just evaluating. All we're doing is putting those numbers in. I'll go ahead and show you. So I'm putting y equals 1 in here. So I've got 1 plus 1 over 2 times 1 minus 3. Okay, so I got 2 on the top, and on the bottom 2 times 1 is 2, minus 3 is minus 1. Okay, now let's put in negative 3. All right, I'm going to tidy up that top. I get negative 2 up there. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Then I got minus 3 more. I've got negative 9. Now, once again, I've got a double minus situation. Remember that cancels each other out, and I get 2 over 9. All right, lastly here, I'm putting in 0. So I've got 0 plus 1 over 2 times 0 minus 3. Tidy up the top, I get a 1. Now 2 times 0 doesn't do anything, so I'm just left with minus 3. Now it doesn't matter in algebra where you put the minus sign here. It's all the same if it's top to bottom. It'd be a little nicer maybe to see that we can just move that out front there. And that's supposed to be a 3, so negative 1/3. Okay, I'm going to just work another one in case you want to see it. Got 5 times 1 minus 1. So I'm doing A. I'm putting in x equals 1. All right, we're going to do the top. We get 5 minus 1 is 4. Do the bottom, I've got 2 plus 1 is 3. All right, I'm doing B here where I'm subbing in a negative 1. So what do we get? 5 and negative 1. That's got to be first. It's the multiplication. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Remember that. So negative 5, negative 6, negative 2 plus 1, negative 1. So double negatives again gets me the 6. I'm putting 0 in for x. All right, a little bit more complicated, but same idea. I'm going to let them do their work here. So we're subbing in a 0. Now you're squaring 0, but that doesn't do anything. So 0 is nice. All of this stuff's going to drop out. We're left with 7 over negative 4. Okay, now we got a little more work for us. We're putting in 2. So 2 squared plus 8, we're just dropping in a 2 everywhere there was an x. Now when we crunch that, look what happens. 27 over 0. Now if you look back here, if we did like we did on the first page, let me just go ahead and do that. Do you remember you could factor this denominator to be this? So 2 is one of our restricted values. So we tried to put that in, and what did we get? We got a 0 on the bottom, which makes this undefined because it was a restricted value. All right, now we're subbing in negative 1, so the order of operations, we're going to do exponents first, then we multiply, On the bottom, we're going to do exponents first, and then we add up. So we get a 0 on the top. Now that's fine. We're allowed to do that. It's only the bottom that becomes undefined. Okay, I'll work some here. Okay, 0 squared is still 0. Lots of zeros on the bottom. I get 1/2. All right, now we're putting in -1. Just remember, you're putting it in, so whenever you sub in, it's in a parenthesis. All right, we're going to square this. So please excuse is exponents. This gets done first down here. I'm going to go ahead and do this next to save some space. That becomes +3 because it's two negatives. The subtraction is just like a negative sign. We just 3 owns that sign. I've got 2/6 or 1/3. All right. Let's put in 3. I was wondering if we're going to get any restricted values in there. I didn't factor that bottom, so I don't know what's going to happen. So we get 9 plus 1 on the top. So I just went ahead and did this. This is 9 plus 1 gets me 10. Down here I've got 9 minus 9. Those are going to disappear. And I get 2. Now 10/2 is the same as 5. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you the restricted values. So if I looked at that bottom, the denominator, and I factored it, I'd get this. Right? So my restricted values would be 3 and -3. And that's none of the ones we're trying to put in, so we're going to be fine. Now I put that 0 in. All right, now the 2 negative signs are going to drop out, and then I'm going to reduce that down, and I would get 2/3. All right, that was A. I'll show it like that. So it's important to remember that you get these parentheses when you sub something in. And the reason is because you don't want to lose it like when you square something. I'm squaring -2, so that's all 4. Here, I'm going to just do it, talk it through because I don't want to write it over and over. This is 4. Now a plus and a minus, this is like I'm taking away -2. So I've got 4 minus 2, so I'm at 2. And then take away 6, I'm at -4. Now here this squares and gets me 4 minus 9, -5. Okay, now double negative signs, one on top and the bottom, so they'll cancel. All right, I got one more. Let's put in 1 here. I get 1 squared plus 1 minus 6. I guess I see that even on this one I didn't show all. You really should put it in parentheses every time, but it's only going to be a problem with the minus signs. So you could skip it if you didn't have the minus signs. But okay, so I've got 1 plus 1 minus 6, and I've got 1 minus 9. Okay, got a minus on the top and the bottom, so that'd make it 4/8, but that reduces to 1/2. Okay, let me see what we got left here. Hold on. Okay, the only thing here is that it's gotten much more complicated, but it's the same idea. We just have 2 I don't knows to sub in. We're subbing in both a 1 and a 2. So here they've worked it for us. Everything's subbed in, and we just have to do our please excuse my dear Aunt Sally to tidy it up, get 3/4. Next, they want us to put in -2, -1. Again, now look how they've got it in parentheses so you don't lose any minus signs, any negatives. So we're just crunching again down to -3/2. If you want to see the crunching, I'll work the next example. Now, this one they want you to put in 1/3 and 0, and do you see what's going to happen? that's going to make the bottom undefined. So because 0 going in on this denominator is going to make that whole thing 0, this is undefined. So b equals 0 would have been a restricted value. Okay, let's work some of these. I'm putting in -1 and 2 for b, so let's do it. Okay, let's start tidying up here. So this is all going to become a -1. So -1 to the third power would become -1. Then times 2, I got -2, -4. Here this is going to be a 1, -1 squared. This is going to be -4, and this is going to be +4. So they're going to cancel out. I'd be left with 1. So the first one gets me -4. Yeah, I was trying to see if this is going to be restricted. I don't think so. I think I'm just going to do, well, I guess I'll do them all. I'm not sure it's really necessary, but, well, actually this one's going to be pretty easy. Okay, now the reason this one's going to be easy is that I can see right off the bat 2 times 0 times -1. That's all going to be 0. And although the bottom's got a bunch of zeros, these are going to drop out, but this is just going to be a 1. So this is okay. It's not undefined, but it's going to be 0. Now let's try to do C here. So I'm putting in these values here. Okay, so let's work through here. I do the exponents first. That's going to be 1 to the third, still just 1. So I'm left multiplying 2 times a half, which is 1. Now down here I've got 1 plus, now do you see this is all going to turn out to be 1, 2 and a half, so that's going to be a 1. And this is going to be, so 1/2 times 1/2. You just multiply across the tops and across the bottom, you get 1/4. Okay, so you've got 1 plus 1 plus 1/4. So you could do this different ways. I'm going to call that, so that's 2 1/4. And you remember how to change this back from from a mixed number to an improper fraction. You do 4 times 2 is 8 plus the 1 is 9. So that entire denominator becomes 9/4. Okay, now if you're rusty with your fractions, I don't blame you, but what we're going to do here is we're going to keep the top. So I'm going to make 1 into a fraction. You'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to make 1 a fraction, so 1/1. So we're going to keep that. This is division. I'm going to change it to multiplication, and I'm going to turn the other fraction upside down. Okay, now we know how to do multiplication. It's just top times top, bottom times bottom, and I get 4/9. Okay, I'm not super excited about doing this again, but I don't know. I'll at least start it. Okay, maybe I'll leave it with just this one. So 1 squared, that's 1. Now I'm squaring -1, so that's going to make it 1. Oh, so I see what's happening here already. This one's not too bad. This is going to make it 1, so it's going to be 1 minus 1. Okay, so the top is going to be 0. Now, as long as we don't have 0 on the bottom, which we won't, we're going to have -8. This is 0. Not undefined, it's 0, so that's okay. Let me see if anything interesting is going to happen here. I'll do b here with the fraction, just in case you're having trouble with fractions. All right, You square a fraction, it means you're multiplying it by itself. So that's 1/4 minus, and -1 squared is 1. Okay, on the bottom here, 1 to the third is still just 1. That doesn't mean anything. 8 times 1/2. You can do this a couple ways. You can just multiply across the tops and the bottoms. You get that. Now that reduces to be 4. Okay, now what do we do with the tops? Well, if you're adding or subtracting fractions, they need a common denominator. So I'm going to put this over 1, make it a fraction. Now let's get them so they have a common denominator. Well, they're both going to need to be a 4. So I'm going to, well, hold on. It was 1/4. It was a 1 over 1. So I'm going to multiply the bottom by 4 to make it a 4. But if you do it to the bottom, you got to do it to the top. So I don't like the way I did this, sorry. It's going to make that 1 4 over 4. Okay, well now we can subtract it because we've got the same slices of pie. So 1 minus 4 is -3 over 4. Okay, so the fractions are difficult here, so if you're rusty with that. So I'm going to make the 4 over a 1. Now I showed you this on the other screen. We're going to change it to multiplication, and flip it upside down. Now you can multiply across the tops and across the bottoms, and you get that. Okay, I'm going to skip C, and we're just going to go with the fraction. So in this video, you saw how to find the restricted values for a rational expression, and we also saw how to evaluate it by just putting in and crunching by using the order of operations. In our next video, we'll start seeing how we reduce.